Well, good morning, few people who are here. This will be one of those days when the other half of our congregation will show up in about 3 minutes. Today we're going to move forward in the story of the children of Israel as they cross the River Jordan, and now they're going to bump up against the city of Jericho. So we're going to be talking about what that city and what their conquest of that city means for our daily lives. And we're going to open with our opening song. Will you rise for that?
Our opening song is number 33, Cry of My Heart, 33.
Then Jehovah said to Joshua, "See, I have given you the city of Jericho." Let us pray. Dear Lord God in heaven, as we kneel before you today, I thank you for the goodness and the potential that you've placed in each one of us. And I ask that you help each one of us to clearly see and address any barriers to that potential becoming reality. Lead us and guide us in paths of peace. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. O Lord, forgive us our trespasses.
As we forgive those who trespass against us.
Amen. Please rise. If you'll open your worship brochures. That's not true. On your chairs today, we had enough information in the brochures that we put the recitation on a separate sheet. So the separate sheet in your chairs has our recitation for today from Joshua chapter 6. Now on the first day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day, and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. And the seventh time it happened, when the priests blew the trumpets, that Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And it happened, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Be seated. Well, if the young people in this room were to go through the Bible and think of stories that are most memorable to them since they were little kids, one of those stories that might stand out is this city of Jericho story. You might remember that the children of Israel had just crossed over into the land of Canaan, the promised land, and right away there was the city of Jericho, fairly close to the River Jordan. And this was a city that had high walls, and it was locked up tight, so there was no one coming out and there was no one going in. And the Lord said, we're going to conquer this city, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to have some people march around the city once each day for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, you're going to march around the city 7 times. And after you've marched around 7 times, the word is going to be given, and you guys are going to shout really loud. And down come the walls. The walls are going to fall down flat, and you'll be able to conquer the city. So, I want to read that story to you today, and I want to issue a challenge to the kids who are here. Because in this story, it's interesting that trumpets appear a number of times. It says the trumpets. There were priests carrying the trumpets, and they kept blowing the trumpets. And I want to see, as I read this story, if you would like to count the number of times that trumpets are mentioned. Okay? Now, when the kids came in today, you were supposed to, I was hoping that everyone got a piece of paper and a little pencil that would allow you to keep score if you want to count them, if that's a help to counting. Okay? Does everyone who wants one have one? Do you want one?
I was just going to say, there's actually one time that says trumpet.
Oh, come on. Are you serious? How do you remember that kind of detail?
Because you already did it to early school like 10 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. That's true. We did it in chapel in the Glenview New Church School, and maybe that could be what throws kids. It's hard to keep count of all of them. But it may be that when they miss one, it may be because they heard trumpet, not trumpets. So anytime that the word trumpet or trumpets is mentioned as I read this story, just jot it down, and then I want to hear how you did in keeping count, all right? Here we go. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war, and you shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And it shall come to pass, when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet," there's the singular, "that all the people will shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every one straight before him." Then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant, and let the 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord." And he said to the people, "Proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord." So it was, when Joshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout nor make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day that I say to you, 'Shout,' then you shall shout." So he had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once. Then they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. Then the priests, bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord, went on continually and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them. But the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord with the priests, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early, about the dawning of the day, and marched around the city, how many times? 7 times. And the 7th time it happened when the priests blew the trumpets that Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." So the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, everyone straight before him, and they took the city. So I guess it was actually 2 times that it says trumpet, not trumpets. Okay? But that's a good point that James made. So how many times did you count the word trumpet or trumpets? Yeah? 14? Anyone else? Counting? Yes? Did you get 14? That's okay. That's 2 people who got 14. Yep. 13. Okay. Anyone else? Yep. 14. Got 14. Okay. 3 people. 14. Yep. 14. 4 people. All right. Yeah. You got 15. Okay. All right. Okay. Good. There was a lot. It was a lot. I'm sure the Israelites didn't count. Okay. It is 14. As far as I could count anyway. I have my own marks, so I keep double checking to make sure, but it seems to be 14. So all right, let's talk about trumpets. And let's talk about a situation in your life. Trumpets. Okay? What are these trumpets? And what is this city of Jericho? And what are these big walls that needed to fall down flat? Well, sometimes there are things in our lives that we really want to do. And maybe they aren't the best thing for us to be doing. Maybe they're even a little bit naughty. And what we can do is start making reasons in our minds for why it's okay to do that thing. So what I want to try to do today with our flip chart is think about a situation where a young person is doing something that's maybe not too healthy or not the thing they should be doing. And what are some of the lies that we can tell ourselves? Like, I wasn't doing anything. Always my favorite. Who can help me think of a situation where we might be not telling ourselves quite the truth? Does anyone want to think of one? I've got 3 possibilities. Okay? Yeah? Tommy?
Child like this side, but her friend's not using that toy anyway, so I guess I'll just take it for myself.
Okay, so the situation is I've taken a toy that belongs to someone else and I'm going to use it myself, okay? So what are some of the things that we could tell ourselves? You led off with one. It was, they're not using it, so I'll use it myself. Are there any other things that we could say about that toy? Yep.
I'll just get it back later.
I'll get it back later. Okay, so we're just going to put toy at the top here. Not using it. I'll give it back later. Okay? And I'm looking especially for things that are just really not true. Okay? It is true that the kid might not be using it. It might be true that you will give it back. Okay? So can we think of some things that really might not be true about this? Okay?
It trusts me enough that I don't have to ask for it.
Okay? I don't have to ask. Okay? Did I see another hand over here? Okay, yeah.
I'm going to give a different example. I was thinking that if I take a bite versus a piece, then the calories don't count.
That's lovely. If I take a bite rather than a whole piece, the calories don't count. That's a scrumptious lie. Forgive the pun. My goodness. Yes.
I'll try not to steal it.
Okay, I'll try not to steal it. Okay? Let's, yeah.
He has lots of toys. He doesn't deserve it.
He has lots of toys. Oh my goodness, good one. Doesn't deserve it. Okay. Were there any others? Another one.
I'm better at it than they are, so I should have it.
Oh, that's pretty scrumptious too. Okay. Let's see how we can do with this. I'm better at it, so they shouldn't have it, right? Okay. Okay, and Mike, you had one more?
Yeah, he's my friend, so he would really want me to have it.
Okay, wants me to have it. And notice you didn't say wants me to play with it. We're wanting to have it now. He wants me to have it. Okay. Wants me to have it. Okay? We're going to work with this one, but I'll tell you that the 3 examples that we came up with were the amount of screen time that we have playing video games or other things on our phones or whatever, where our parents might say, you've had enough screen time. I don't use it that often. Is that really true? Okay. Or how about talking about people in mean ways behind their backs? Or a third example I thought of is if we're not making an effort or doing our best or doing the bare minimum. Okay, so those were 3 examples that we could have worked with as well, but I think we can work with this one. So now, what I want to do is come up with, on the other side of the board for this situation involving the toy, the truth of the situation. Okay, especially if we hit one here that's pretty much of a lie. Okay, all right. So how about not using? He's not using it. She's not using it. Okay, what's the truth? Yep.
We don't know unless we ask whether they were planning to use it or not.
Okay.
Maybe they simply ran to the bathroom for a minute.
Ah. Okay, planning to use it. I'll just write down. Okay, I'll give it back. What's the truth about that?
I don't really intend to.
Don't intend to. Okay? How about I don't have to ask. I don't have to ask. What's the truth? Yes, you should. Yes, you should. We're going to use these, folks. So that's why I'm writing them down here. Might be hard because you won't be able to read them. Yep. Let's see. Next one. I'll try not to steal. Well, that's a good thing. That's not a lie. That's a great thing. So let's skip over that one. That person has lots of toys, doesn't deserve it. What's the truth? Still not yours. Okay? Here we go. We'll put a bracket on this one. Still not yours. Okay? I'm better at it. They shouldn't have it. I'm better at it. They shouldn't have it. What's the real truth? They should have it. It's theirs. They should have it.
How are they going to get better if you have it?
Okay. And finally, they want me to have it. What's the truth? Probably not. Okay. Okay, now, if the kids can't read this board from that far away, I wonder if the kids would like to come forward just for a minute here at the front of the room. Can I have the young people come forward? Be real brave. Come on. Come on. Okay. Here we go. And you can have a seat. Just have a seat here, because you're going to need to face the board. Okay. I'm assuming everybody else can read the board fine, and here's what we're going to do. Now, our other visual aid for today is your hand. Everybody show me your hand. Okay, now make your hand into a little trumpet-shaped thing like this. And then do this. Okay, all right. I I knew that was going to be embarrassing and hard, but you made it. Good job. Okay. Now, I want to tell you that in this story, the big high walls around Jericho that needed to topple, that needed to fall down flat, are like the lies we can tell us. They're big walls that are sort of defending what we want, and they're the lies that we tell us that are sometimes hard to see over and hard to break down, okay? And the trumpets, 14 times in this story, the trumpets are when we tell the truth. Okay? So, since the adults are probably way too embarrassed to be able to do this, what I want to do is this. I want to read the lie, and then I want to hear you go, planning to use it. Say the truth. I want you to say the truth. That's the trumpet. I'll say, don't give it I'll give it right back. You say, I don't intend to. Okay, you get the idea? So are you ready? Kids with your trumpets, where are your trumpets? Show me your trumpets. Okay, here we go. Ready? All right. They're not using it. They're planning to use it. Okay? Here we go. I'll give it right back. I don't intend to. I don't have to ask. Yes, I do. Okay? That person has lots of toys. They don't deserve it. It's still not yours. Okay? And then I'm better at it. They shouldn't have it. They should have it. And that person wants me to have it. Probably not. Okay? That's a simple little exercise to make it clear what we're talking about in this story as a story of our lives. We're entering into the promised land, something new and different for us. And just as we're entering into that land, we bump up against something that maybe, I really want that toy. I want it my way. And here are all the reasons I can think of for why I ought to have it that way. Those are the walls of Jericho. And the trumpets that the priests were sounding 14 times in 17 verses are all of the things that we tell ourselves that, nope, here's the real truth about the situation. Okay? I invite you now to bow your heads for a time of prayer. Dear Lord God, we thank you for the stories of your word and the people in our lives who help each one of us sound the trumpet. Help us to do that this week in our work and in our relationships. Thanks for all that you do for us. Amen. We rise now for our next psalm.
Our next song is number 32, Crown and King of Kings, 32.
Oh
I guess the pastor's a little rusty today. We are now on summer mode, so we shouldn't have broken for a song right there. We should have just continued on into a conversation with the adults. So that's what we're going to do right now. And maybe what we'll do is just circle back and sing one more verse of that song after the next piece of what we do together. So there is a priest in the new church who lives in Massachusetts. I think in his retirement he's still there, but he might be up in Maine or somewhere. But he lives in Massachusetts, and he has a hypothesis about the Bible. And his hypothesis is that the Bible is the storybook of your spiritual life from start to finish. So when he reads the story, for example, of the Garden of Eden and the fall from paradise, he might think about the first time early on in our lives when we say no to a higher authority. That might be the terrible twos, when the story of the Garden of Eden plays itself out. The time of the Judges he thinks about as being the time of teenage years, when teenagers need laws and rules and structure in their life. I'll point to him as well. Laws and rules and structure in their life to help keep them guided in a good direction. And that's what the Judges were all about, one after the other at that time in Israel's history. Or how about the prophets? This gentleman wonders if the time of the prophets is actually picturing the time that we call midlife crisis. And then he says, isn't it interesting that most of the ugliest beasts that appear in the Bible don't appear until the end of the storybook, the book of Revelation? He says, I've sometimes wondered if it takes us until we are 60, 70, 80 years old or older for the Lord to finally start showing us what human nature is really like apart from the Lord's presence in our lives. Interesting hypothesis. And incidentally, some of the most beautiful and inspiring images in all of the Bible also appear at the end of the storybook. So, for example, the vision of the Son of Man standing in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands. Or the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Well, isn't it so true that as we go through our lives, this year you may be ready to see more about yourself, or we might be ready to see more about ourselves than we were last year. And certainly, we as adults see a whole lot more about ourselves than we did when we were 15 or 16 years old. There's another observation that's out there, and this comes from the realm of addictions, people who are getting past their addictions. And it's a common experience for people in that situation to discover that I put down my addictive behavior, and what they say is, and all of my issues started to come up. Certain things started to bubble to the surface that I'd never seen or felt before. And that's interesting because it really confirms a teaching that we're given in the new church. And that teaching says that when we put aside a hurtful behavior or attitude, something outward in our lives, it allows the Lord to enter in and to start working with us on deeper levels. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us that when we put aside something that is hurtful or destructive, that deeper issues would start to well up and come to our awareness. Things that we hadn't seen or felt before. So, for an example might be any negative behavior that you can think of that you've worked on, and you've stopped that behavior, and now you start to see some of the patterned ways of thinking that were attached to that behavior that you weren't seeing while you were caught up in it. Or maybe you start to become aware of some of the aims or intentions that were going on all along that, again, you might not have been aware of. And you might even become aware of some surprisingly deeper goals in your life, underlying even your intentions, that really can attach themselves in a way that they're trying to harm you or other people around you. So deeper awarenesses that start to come. And that's what the story of the city of Jericho and the conquest of Jericho is all about. The story of Jericho is about taking an honest look at ourselves and seeing something about ourselves that we maybe haven't seen before and starting to come to grips with it. So I want to begin with the adults by acknowledging that it can be hard to take a really honest look at ourselves. Who of us loves to spend time seeing the less desirable and even ugly parts of our character? Who of us loves to spend time hanging out with feelings of guilt and shame that can come as part of getting honest with ourselves? Sometimes it's hard to get past our pride or our ego, and we talked about that last week in the story of crossing the Jordan River. It can be hard to admit, I've got a flaw that I need to work on, or I experienced a failing last week or the week before that I need to come to grips with. So not only is it challenging to take a good, honest look at ourselves from time to time, but it can be a scary thing as well. It can be threatening to different parts of who we are, and especially to our egos. And it's like being in a quiet room. Imagine yourself being in a quiet, meditative space, nice, peaceful, calm place, and your eyes are closed. And then you open your eyes, and right in front of you is just an ugly monster, just... Ugh! That's what taking an honest look at ourselves can be like. So it can be challenging, it can be scary. Now let's remind ourselves of where we are in the story of the children of Israel. Last week, the children of Israel had crossed the Jordan River, and they had entered into the Promised Land. And we might think of that as representing or symbolizing any new beginning that you or I make, where we're getting past some form of outward behavior that has been hurting us or other people around us. Right after we cross the River Jordan, there is the city of Jericho. It's a big city, it's fortified, it has high walls, and there's no one going out and no one coming in. So from an outsider's perspective, big high walls, I'm not able to see into what's really going on in this part of my life. And from an inner perspective, it's I'm so tightly bound up in here with this thing that there's no positive influence coming into me for this piece of who I am. Okay, so that's the city of Jericho for each one of us. But why wouldn't we take an honest look? What have we got to lose? Taking an honest look from time to time is something that allows us to see something about ourselves that we need to see and that we need to deal with, either now or in the future. So why wouldn't we just be honest? If we're honest with ourselves, that is the first step to dealing with it and being freed from it. There's good news in this story, because even though taking an honest look at ourselves is something that can be challenging and even scary, it's something that when the time is right and we're willing, it's something that we are ready and able to accomplish. So notice at the beginning of the story, Jehovah said to Joshua, before anything else had happened in the story, "See, I have given you the city of Jericho." It's almost as though the victory is enjoyed before the battle even starts. Our theology explains that piece of it, or talks about that piece of it, by simply saying the children of Israel were going to capture Jericho. They were going to succeed. And then at the end of the story, it simply says, they took the city. So it's not a question of whether or not we will enjoy a victory in this battle. The question is, will we engage with the Lord in a way that allows the walls to come down? So what is that city of Jericho? City of Jericho we might think of as the next big thing that is blocking our way to the next experience of heaven that we want to enjoy in our lives or in relationships. We can think of it as the leading edge of our personal spiritual growth at work or in relationships or in our marriages. We can think of it as the thing that we're not yet seeing about ourselves, big high walls. We can think of it as the next thing in our lives that if we would see and address it, it would have a significant impact on us for good. And what are the walls? We've already talked about them. They are the walls of defensiveness. They are the lies that we tell ourselves that defend and legitimize whatever is going on inside of us or whatever it is that we want to achieve that may not be the healthiest thing for us. They are the walls of denial and self-deception. They are the walls of, I'm not that way. They're the walls of, I don't want to see what's there. Those are the walls. So the question today is, how do we topple the walls? And I think the story of Jericho gives us an outline. So Joshua and the men of the war, and then the men of war were to march around the city once a day for 6 days. They were to do so 7 times on the 7th day. And after the men of war and Joshua came the priests blowing the trumpets. Behind the priests blowing the trumpets were more priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, which housed the 10 Commandments. And then finally came the rear guard. Joshua and the men of war, we might think of them as that part of us that's willing to go into battle for the sake of something better. The priests we can think of as that part of us that is willing to stand up for spiritual principles and put them into practice. The Ark of the Covenant is always a symbol for the power of the Lord, and in this context, the power to see and tell ourselves the truth so that those walls can fall flat. The rear guard might be that part of us that guards and protects what is good and wholesome and true within us, wanting those parts of us to come out. And going around the city is obviously a symbol for surveying the situation, exploring what is there, and looking at things from all angles, looking at it from all the way around. And then come those trumpets. The trumpets symbolize our willingness to tell ourselves the truth for the sake of something better. The trumpets are clarity. The trumpets are the reality of the situation. The trumpets are what's really going on in our lives and the real nature of what we're dealing with underneath the surface. That's the trumpets. And we've already drawn attention to the fact that the trumpets were mentioned 14 times in 17 verses. That's almost, there's a little trumpet, that's almost once every verse. The trumpets, the trumpets, the trumpets, the trumpets, and on it goes 14 times. One time it says that the priests were continually blowing the trumpets, and twice it says they kept on blowing the trumpets. As though sometimes we need to keep telling ourselves the truth of our situation over and over again, or we will tend to fall back into the lies that we may have been telling ourselves. If we can't tell ourselves the honest truth about us, we can't go forward. The walls stay up. So we want to be fearless truth tellers, telling ourselves the whole truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And finally, there are the people who let out the shout at the end, and that symbolizes each one of us telling ourselves the truth and really meaning it, and setting ourselves against that challenging thing that lies behind the walls. So as we move now to the end of the adult piece of this, let's focus in on just 2 things, 2 parts of the story. First is surveying the situation or taking an honest look, and the second is telling ourselves the truth. So, taking an honest look. How do we examine ourselves when it's time to do that? What parts of ourselves do we especially look at? Psalm 39 answers that question very clearly. It says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart." That means the intentions and underlying goals of our hearts. Try me, it says, and know my thoughts. That's our patterns of thinking. And see if there be any wicked way in me, which are our actions and words. Okay? So that gives us 4 levels of self-examination, 4 levels on which to look at ourselves. And from superficial to deep, those are our actions and words, then our patterns of thinking, then the intentions of our hearts, and then our underlying goals underneath everything else. So, let's see. An example. You're driving down the road. Someone cuts you off in traffic. This is an example I've often given before. So you lay on your horn and you call the person a jerk. Those are your actions and your words. You think to yourself, that idiot, and you start to imagine a way that you can get even. Those are your thoughts. And so your intention is to get even. Pretty simple. And when you ask yourself this question, what would I do if I could get away with it? What would I do if I wouldn't get in trouble with the civil law and my reputation wouldn't be harmed in any way? What would that part of me do that's calling this guy a jerk? And lo and behold, you discover something you didn't know before. I would wipe that jerk off the face of the earth.
Now, you might think that doesn't exist inside of you, or welling up out of the place that we call hell, but it really does. And you won't know that until you practice what Psalm 139 recommends. But when you practice it, it is so freeing, it's unbelievable. Another example, husband and wife are having an altercation in their home. So the husband is fighting with his wife, and he says, her idea is dumb. His thought is, her idea is dumb. His intention might be, unbeknownst to himself, to put her down and hold her in contempt. And on the deepest level, again, unbeknownst to himself, his underlying goal and desire might be that she submit to his will. Pretty graphic. But folks, it really is there when we go looking for it. So this method of self-examination is talked about in Psalm 139 is something that is simple, it's quick, it's easy, it's deeply searching, and it's wonderfully clarifying. And it is complete. By the time you have finished looking at those 4 different levels of your being, there's nowhere else to go. There's no other level to look at. You've gone at that point into all the cracks and crevices. And doing this is also something that can be surprisingly freeing. It's even cathartic. One person who took this on and tried it for himself said, wow, that method of self-examination from Psalm 139, that is solid gold. Another person was afraid to go through this process of self-examination on an issue that he was facing in his life. He was afraid of the feelings of guilt and shame that he would encounter and a sense of distance that he thought he would feel from the Lord. And he said it was just the opposite. The further I went through self-examination, the closer I felt to the Lord. It was as though the Lord was carrying me through the very situation. And that is true. The Doctrine for the New Church says that when we decide to take an honest look at ourselves, it's actually the Lord who inspired us to do that in the first place. And as we go through that process, He is the one who then reveals things to us that we're ready to see. So that statement from our theology is demonstrating how the Lord is with us right through the process and even before the process gets started. I felt more close to the Lord as I went through the process rather than less, is what this gentleman said. And second then, what about telling ourselves the truth? Telling ourselves the truth can feel difficult, but it's really not that difficult to do. It's just not that hard to simply tell yourself the truth. In Deuteronomy, the Lord says, the truth isn't too mysterious for you. It's not way far away up in heaven where someone else needs to go up there and get it and bring it back to you. It's not way across the ocean where someone needs to go across the sea and get it and bring it back to you. But He says the truth is very near you. It's in your heart and it's in your mouth. It's right there. You know it. So why not just say it? And remember that in this story, like the story of crossing the Jordan River, the 10 Commandments figure in prominently. They are there to help us. And once again, in our theology, there is a stress that's laid especially on the commandments against murder, adultery, stealing, and bearing false witness. I call them the Fabulous Four. So, from the perspective of murder, no, what I'm doing is holding that other person in hate and contempt. From the perspective of adultery, no, what I'm doing is lewd and licentious. It's foolish, unmerciful, cruel, against the spirit of marriage and the freedom or freedom of choice that belongs in a marriage relationship. From the perspective of stealing, no, what I'm doing is taking what doesn't belong to me and deceiving myself and other people around me. And finally, from the perspective of bearing false witness, no, I'm lying to myself and I'm lying to other people. And in all of it, I'm trying to get other people to bow to my will and do what I want. That's really the bottom line in breaking any of these commandments. It's what it really comes down to. So the other night, I woke up and something came into my mind that I had been wrestling with, and I started to wrestle with it as we often do in the middle of a nighttime. And I couldn't get myself back to sleep. So, lo and behold, I said, well, maybe this would be a great time to try the story of Jericho on for size. So I got into it and I looked at the real truth of the situation, and then I just started to say that truth to myself over and over again. No, this is the situation. This is what's going on. And I don't remember when, but it was nice to be able to roll back and go to sleep. So, short story, the story of Jericho is a story about taking an honest look at something that blocks our further entrance into the heaven that we want to enjoy. And it's also about telling ourselves the truth about our situation so that the walls of defensiveness can come down and so that we can move past that thing and move forward in our lives. That's what we're talking about today. So simple. So what then is the personal Jericho that you are ready to face and come to grips with this week? The Lord says, "See, I have given you the city of Jericho." Amen. So I invite you now to bow your heads for a time of prayer. I'll offer an introductory prayer and then invite you to have a quiet conversation with the Lord yourselves. Lord God, we thank you for the stories of the Word that are so vivid and that bring simple messages across to us in such strong ways. Help us, Lord, to put this story to use in our lives this week. And now we hear the silent prayers of our hearts. Rise for our next song, which will be a repeat for us.
So we will sing again, number 32. Just one time here. Crown of King of Kings.
Lord, will you accept this free will offering from all of us? Let it be a symbol of our willingness to walk up gently sloping paths with all who we meet. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with us all. Amen. Okay, we'll have our closing song.
Our closing song is number 111, Lord Reign in Me, 111.
Thank you.
right. Well, we have a little time for questions, comments, thoughts, reflections, and we have microphones circulating so people online can stay with us. Anyone have some thoughts they'd like to share? Bonnie, you want to just talk into your mic?
Just thank you for the subject. It's just such a good reminder that we all have to examine ourselves, and sort of sometimes it feels like, oh well, there's just too much going on. I'm just where I am, and that's gonna have to be good enough. I don't really need to, I'll just put this off till later, and it's okay. I'm just gonna be the way I am, and that's it, But really, there's so much reason to do the work.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, Jericho, of course, has frequent earthquakes, okay? And so just putting that in the context of the sermon, to knock down those walls continually, sometimes it does take a shock, whether that's an earthquake occurring in our lives or ram's horns blowing in our ears. I can't give you an analogy for exact area. But that sometimes these crises can encourage us to look forward into things.
Neat. Zero in on
The
something.
second thing is I'm not sure, I noticed the last two songs had rain and again in them. I wonder if that was intentional part of the song.
Yeah. For those online, maybe we just had 2 nights of nice heavy rain. Anyone else? Isn't the silence nice? They walked around the city in silence. Okay. All right, so on to announcements then. The first is, can we have a show of hands of people who have July anniversaries? I'm sorry, June anniversary. Wait, we would have done... Yeah, we're still in June. Sorry. Moving too far ahead. I was just reading about 4th of July. So yes, June anniversaries. June anniversaries. Here we go. Bonnie didn't want to be missed. Good. Well, congratulations, everybody. That's cool. How many years?
This will be
22. 22. John verifies that. Others? 20? 39. Wow. Okay. All right. Good. 3. Phil says 3. Okay. Okay. Well, congratulations, people. Second is, let's look at the announcement sheet and just highlight a few things. First, we have a New Church Day barbecue. New Church Day are words that refer to the birthday of our church. The birthday of the new church is celebrated each year on June 19th. It also happens to be the pastor's birthday, but you don't have to bring me presents. And so this year, Mac and Jillian are going to host a barbecue, and you can read about it there. It's going to be next Saturday evening. Anyone is welcome to come. And there's the street address there and all that stuff you need to know about that. Then next Sunday, we'll be celebrating the birthday of our church. And the way we'll do that is that at 9:30 we will have a traditional sermon delivered in that room over there. So don't come to worship next Sunday morning for a contemporary service. Then in the afternoon, we will have what we call a New Church Day pageant at 4:30 in the afternoon. 4:30 matching up with our Christmas pageant now. We used to do these at 5, but we're going to do them at 4:30, so pageants happen at 4:30. 4:30 in the afternoon, out in the courtyard. We'll have chairs set up across the lawn, and we'll have a pageant depicting scenes from the book of Revelation. Okay, so those are your 2 options for next week. There is stuff you can read about the 4th of July. I'll just note that this is an older version of a message about the 4th of July, saying that we still need people to put up the flag and do the sound system. Those 2 things are no longer true. So what we need right now then is just help for cooking and preparing the meal. Finally, today I have a little chart that I made up for you with columns on it, 2 sides to it with simple instructions, and this is a way that you can go through self-examination if you would like to in writing. It makes the process of self-examination and the experiences of it very clear and clarifying. And it just has 4 columns for your actions and words, your thoughts, your intentions, and the deeper desires of your will. So anyone who would like that, I made about 10 copies here, and I'll just have them up front. Otherwise, good to see everybody today. Have a great Sunday, stay dry, and we'll see you again next week in some form for the celebration of June 19th. Okay? Take care.